Today, I wanted to talk about a book that I recently finished reading. This whole mic recording stuff is completely out of my comfort zone, so this will be an experiment definitely, but I hope it turns out alright. Anyways, more important is the topic of this video, an obscure little book that goes by the title of Karasu. It was written by Chiyo, and the first chapter was put online May 31st, 2013. Because it was uploaded online, Karasu isn't a book in the traditional sense, like a paperback or hardcover, and is instead a web novel. This is a rarity by my experience, at least compared to the webcomics and fan fictions that are out there. As such, I wasn't really sure what to expect from Karasu going in, but by the end of this video, I hope some other people will be interested in checking out the story for themselves, because I think this was a great little story, and it deserved more attention than it got. To start, I can't help but talk a little bit about how I even found Karasu in the first place. Years ago, there was a drawing that got my attention. The drawing was of a crow person, wielding a staff and dressed in some cool looking robes. Now, I've always been a fan of fantasy stories, and especially in characters like this, so everything about that drawing got me interested. But for some reason, I didn't look into it any further, and after that day, I forgot about the drawing. Jump ahead a couple years, and by chance, I found that same exact drawing again. This time I realized, hey, there might be a story behind this. So I went looking for more. If there was a story behind Crow Dude, I was expecting something like a webcomic, or maybe just a short description of his past. You can imagine I was surprised to find a full-fledged novel written about this guy. And not just one. Karasu is split into 2 books. The first is 40 chapters, and the second is 18. The second one is unfinished, but I'll get to more of that later. As for the setting, the world of Karasu takes place in feudal Japan, complete with all the politics and technology of the time period. But as the crow person would suggest, it's not just humans living in this world. Karasu is also inhabited by various types of yokai. Yokai are a pretty common theme in stories nowadays, but for anyone who doesn't know, a quick description would label them as creatures and spirits out of Japanese mythology. Some yokai are more well known than others, even here in the Western world. For example, the kitsune, the Japanese word for fox, which has the ability to shapeshift and may possess multiple tails as well. Or the kappa, a turtle-like water creature with some, questionable powers. Yokai share a common theme of being linked to the supernatural or spiritual world. In the old stories, many yokai are seen as pranksters and tricksters, and use their powers to cause trouble for humans around them. These creatures are often an influence on more modern stories as well, such as Okami. There's a reason I chose that game for background footage. They're also the subject of several anime, like Natsume Yujincho, Mushishi, Mononoke, or Holic, to name a few. As you might have guessed, the main character of Karasu is also a yokai, specifically a Karasu Tengu. Tengu may appear different based on the myth you see them in. In some cases, they appear more human-like, with a red mask and a long nose, but in other cases, they more strongly resemble birds. Karasu is one of those cases. In fact, Karasu is the Japanese word for crow, at least according to Google Translate. The Tengu that I first saw, all those years ago, also happens to be the main character and star of the show, a monk and physician in training named Shichi. Now, from the beginning of Karasu, I noticed that this world's depiction of yokai was a bit different from the usual. To use some previous examples of Mushishi and Natsume Yujincho, in those stories, a few people are born with a gift to see into the supernatural world, but most people just live normal lives, not even knowing that these spirits exist. In Karasu though, yokai aren't so much spirits as they are real people like everyone else. Humans know about, and as far as I can tell have always known about, the existence of yokai, and they're not invisible from view. Everyone can see them. Although humans and yokai mostly live separate from each other, in some of the largest cities, you can even find them living together. This is a good time, though, to get into one of Karasu's central themes, which is the tension between humans and yokai. In a fictional world like this, where humans and these strange creatures live together, it shouldn't be surprising that there's a history of hatred on both sides towards the other. Humans are afraid of yokai magic and the things it can do, while the yokai are afraid of violence and torture that humans have resorted to in the past. Shichi himself was raised like any other yokai to believe that humans are a violent and dangerous creature and to stay away from them at all costs. This divide between the two groups sets up an inner conflict in Shichi from the beginning. Are all humans bad? I don't want to spoil too much, of course, but I am going to jump into the first chapter. One day, Shichi is out gathering herbs on the mountainside near his temple. It seems like any other day for the monk, but then he comes across a human. She's injured and unable to walk, and at first, neither is really sure what to make of the other. After some thinking, though, Shichi realizes no monk worth his robes could leave someone to suffer, not even if that someone is a human, so he decides to risk helping her. And from this point on, everything about Shichi's life seems to change, and it begins a journey for the Tengu to really try and find his place in the world, and to find what that larger world is like outside the confines of his temple. Here's just a small excerpt from the first chapter, when human and Tengu meet. In just a few words, I think it actually says a lot about the themes of Karasu and its people. "You're not at all like the stories," she said. A smile lingered on her face as she spoke. "Neither are you." One chapter was really all it took for me to get invested in Karasu, especially in Shichi as the main character. The combination of monk and physician might sound too good to be true at first. He might as well be building an orphanage or solving world hunger at this point. But what made Shichi really work for me was just how down-to-earth and normal he seemed despite his position. Shichi is just a normal guy. He really never appeared preachy or condescending to me in the way he acts and speaks. In fact, his very first spoken line, as a monk who's supposed to remain calm and free of emotion, is of him getting annoyed and then instantly regretting it. "Do you understand me?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Of course I understand you," he said, a bit offended. It took him a moment to consider his words before he spoke again. What I meant was, to ask, that is." The woman swallowed. Noticing her anxiety, he crouched down beside her to avoid looming. "Do you need help?" he said, this time more gently. Shichi's main rule in life is simply to help people, regardless of who those people might be or what they've done in the past. He's skilled at his work as a physician, but those skills didn't just come from nowhere. Shichi is actually 84 years old. Tengu, like many yokai, have a much longer lifespan than humans do. Shichi's still pretty young by yokai standards, but this means he's already had decades of experience under some of the most skillful teachers around. Despite all this, life is not easy for Shichi and Karasu. Shichi does have flaws of his own. He can fall into anger or excitement or even overconfidence. You know, all those things a monk isn't supposed to be. In these ways he's very human, which is strange when we're talking about yokai, but again, this makes him a down-to-earth, relatable character to follow. Shichi can end up making mistakes like anyone else, and these kind of mistakes can be really costly, especially when it comes to the field of medicine, and people's lives are on the line. Because of this, and many other moments throughout, Shichi can end up questioning his optimistic view of the world, and neutral take on humans and yokai. I just think that, overall, Shichi was an interesting character to follow, and to see all his moments and struggles and changes throughout. I think that by the end of the story, or at least where Book 2 cuts off, we really get to see Shichi grow as a character, after he's been through hell and back again. And believe me, when I say hell and back again, I mean it. Where there is danger, there is also Shichi. Half the time, he knows what he's getting himself into, and still goes for it anyways. Because of this, there's usually at least one person that is actively trying to murder him, and Shichi, the crazy monk that he is, tries to protect those people that are trying to hurt him. There were several moments throughout where I found myself looking at the screen and wishing I could just yell at Shichi. "No, don't do it. What are you doing, you stupid, wonderful, empathetic Tengu." Yeah, I can't be mad at him. I know that I could never live the way Shichi does in this world, but the way he sticks to his morals and really tries to help everybody is kind of inspiring in a way. He doesn't point the blame at humans, like so many other yokai do, and instead tries to see the best in even them. Because yes, there are humans out there that look at Shichi as more than just a monster. You may be wondering about some of the other characters by this point, and I think now's a good time to bring in the second main character and long-term travel companion, a kitsune named Chiyo. Despite being older than Shichi by at least 100 years, I don't remember exactly how much, Chiyo is a sassy, self-absorbed child of a yokai. She loves free food and lazing around napping and pretty clothes, and in general, not putting in any effort whatsoever. Being the polar opposite of Shichi, these two form a fantastic duo, especially when it comes to their dialogue. I think one of my favorite aspects about Karasu overall was the dialogue. It's written to be very simple, everyday speech, and because of this, I think conversation felt natural and flowed well. Karasu may be a serious story when you get down to it, but it doesn't take itself seriously all the time. The bickering between Shichi and Chiyo is perfect for lightening the mood when it needs to. An example from Book 1, Chapter 15. "I think I was better off with the poisoned food," she said. "At least it had flavor. I think I was better off without a whiny fox using me as a rickshaw all day." "Don't flatter yourself," she said. "Rickshaws don't trip over rocks. You're perfectly welcome to walk on your own." Chiyo didn't reply, going back to biting awkwardly at the large root. These two are like an old married couple, and it's great. To a degree, I think they work as foils to each other. At the same time, though, they have characteristics and elements of their past that make them similar, beyond the fact that they're both yokai. Chiyo might sound annoying and pretty useless from these descriptions, but that isn't all there is to her character. Under her childish nature, there's a deeper loneliness, and this is one of the few things she can really share with Shichi. Despite their arguments, and Chiyo's unwillingness to comply with anyone, in the end, she'll usually listen to what Shichi has to say, and will follow what the Tengu thinks is the right thing to do. And for every downright selfish choice she makes, there's a bit of kindness hidden in that little kitsune heart too. Chiyo is an important part of Karasu, and the story just wouldn't be the same without her. Of course, there's also plenty of side characters that join over the course of the story too. These include Kana, Aki, Sagiri, Rinka, Saisei, Fumi, Gin, and Yu. It shouldn't be surprising that Shichi gets the most time in development by the end, with Chiyo following in second, but the side characters are also important and have their own moments, that I'm not going to spoil, that add to the story too. Now, as Karasu progresses and we meet these characters, the story oftentimes jumps between traveling and staying in one place. The writing for descriptions of the characters and environment is a lot like the dialogue, simple but effective. Again from the first chapter. "His mind was wandering, hazy with the scent of pine and the warmth of the sun. He was gathering herbs, examining their stalks and leaves before making a smart cut at the base. It was important not to overpick, or there might not be anything left for the next season. His hands, black as the rest of him, smelled of chickweed and shiso." Karasu does a great job of giving the reader a strong mental image, without lingering on too many unnecessary details. It might seem like a bunch of talk about plants is pretty unnecessary, but I think these things only added to Karasu's themes, especially regarding healing and medicine. Remember, this is feudal Japan, and there were no such things as penicillin or iodine or any of the modern machinery that we use today. Almost all of Shichi's healing revolves around his knowledge of herbs, along with the occasional use of acupuncture. Although Shichi and Ko spend some time in certain places to do their work, as I mentioned before, there's also plenty of traveling in Karasu. This is another way in which Karasu reminds me of episodic spirit shows. Again, Mushishi, Natsume Yujincho, those kinds. In moments like this, Karasu really takes its time to put an emphasis on character interaction, and those kind of feel-good, heartwarming moments that I love about the previously mentioned shows. There are some moments that are really touching here too, and they make all the difficulties that the characters have been through up to this point seem worth something in the end, even if it's just the little moments. I'm getting too sappy. Moving on. Another way in which Karasu reminds me of these anime is in its lack of an end goal. And by that I mean, we as readers really have no idea how Karasu could end. There is no world to save or great treasure to find or demon king to defeat. In this case, I guess it would be human king. Instead, I think the yokai's journey is more about taking your time to enjoy the ride than wondering where that ride is going to take you in the end, if that makes sense. If I had to break Karasu down into some more descriptive genres, I would say it's about 60% slice of life, 30% adventure, and 10% action. Those are just some rough guesses, don't quote me on them, but it does give you an idea of what you're getting into. Despite the mostly calm things I've said about Karasu up to this point, it does have its fair share of pretty violent moments. Sometimes, even Shichi has to defend himself, much as he doesn't want to, but this adds more to his inner conflict and view of the world. Is he doing all he can to help? And is that help even useful? Does he trust people, even people that obviously don't trust him? In many cases, Shichi takes the approach of passive resistance, getting beaten down, but always coming back for more. He's stubborn and frustrating because of this, but in a good way. It's the kind of devoted persistence where you can only wish the best for that Tengu in the end. Back to the actual scenes, the action in Karasu is cool and entertaining by itself. Fights were definitely written with some tension in mind, and they can keep you on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next. From Book 1, Chapter 18. His body moved faster than Shichi could follow, his knife no more than a glint in the air. The swipes came one after another. Only a few were parried before the blade found skin, sending a splatter of blood onto a nearby tree. The cut ran across the back of Shichi's hand, painful enough to loosen his grip on the staff. Now, there are certain characters who you know will survive these fights, cough cough, Shichi, but it still doesn't take away from the impact of these scenes. Yokai magic can do a lot in this world, but one thing it can't do is bring people back from the dead. Not counting zombies, they're gone for good. And this is one thing for Shichi as a physician that is, and always will be, completely out of his control. Although most of Karasu is told during the time of Shichi's journey, occasionally, parts of a chapter, or even full chapters, will be devoted to flashbacks. Oftentimes in stories, I find that flashbacks just bore me. They drag you out of the current action, and go on for too long about things that you really aren't interested in. But in a story as character-driven and meandering as Karasu is, I think these flashbacks only added to the history and characterization of the Tengu. There are some really important scenes in the past for Shichi's character. At least, I thought they were important, and I read these chapters as interested as I was in any of the other ones. As a side note, I really like the way the chapters were named. Each chapter name is a single word, but that word has something to do with the events that happen in the chapter. To go over a couple in the first book: turmeric, hadomugi, truth, smoke, jealousy, bath, fire, ash, dough, feather. And they continue on like that, in a similar fashion. This is a great way to hint at the themes of each chapter, and to give you some strong mental imagery too. It makes several of the chapters memorable to me, just by seeing their names, and I can remember the things that happened at that time. It's a great naming system for bringing those moments back to you. In case you hadn't guessed by this point, Karasu to me was, more than anything else, just an enjoyable story to read. I don't think there was a single chapter where I found myself skipping around or skimming, and it kind of became a part of my schedule every night to just read the next chapter of Karasu, which usually turned into the next 2 chapters, or 3, or 4. If you grab a cup of tea and settle down in the next chapter of Karasu for the night, that's a good night by my standards. Yes, I'm that lame. Like any story though, Karasu wasn't perfect. There's one character in Book 2, who I'm not going to name, who is just pure evil, and this goes against how Karasu worked to humanize even the bad guys with some hint of compassion in their characters. You could say there are people like this in reality, but in fiction, I think it removes a layer of complexity that the character could have had. Then there's Shichi, who has titanium-plated plot armor. It's no spoiler to say that he's going to survive, despite the amount of downright deadly situations that he finds himself in. I think everyone reading will realize this quickly. However, this didn't really bother me much. He is the main character after all, and it's a common thing to see this invincibility in these kind of characters. Plus, I certainly didn't want to see Shichi die, so hooray for plot armor by me. There are other minor story and character elements I could complain about, but the biggest downside to Karasu you should know, if you're looking to read it, is the fact that it's unfinished. The last chapter, which is Book 2, Chapter 18, ends on a cliffhanger, and this is torture if you've been enjoying the story up to this point. I don't know if Karasu will ever continue. That last chapter was posted back in 2015, but of course, I'll take what we have so far, which is plenty on its own. Overall, if you don't mind this lack of a proper ending, I would highly recommend Karasu to fans of yokai stories out there. It had a good balance between action and calm moments, memorable characters, honestly, I think I'm gonna have a hard time forgetting Shichi, and a central theme of this fantasy racism between humans and yokai, which our Tengu tries his best to approach with healing and compassion. It's a welcoming lifestyle to see in the dangerous world of Karasu. So I hope that anyone who's interested can go out and find some enjoyment in this story, and meaning in Shichi's journey. From all the little moments with Chiyo by his side, or more accurately, hitching a ride on his shoulder, to the towns and people they come across, to the different types of yokai and the powers that they possess, to the fights and injuries and illnesses and cures. I know that, at the very least, Karasu meant something to me. So, that's about it for now. I may not have the best mic, or voice, for making these kind of videos, but apparently Karasu is the thing that was enough to make me just say, screw it, I'm doing this anyways. Now that I have, I'm a bit tempted to do some more videos in this kind of style, on some more obscure fantasy stories, but I don't know, these videos honestly take a really long time to make, so we'll see. Either way, until then, thanks for watching, and happy reading.